What if I told you the richest people in history make today's billionaires look broke? From kings who owned entire continents to industrial titans who could buy nations, the story of wealth through time is wilder than fiction. Let's uncover just how unimaginable rich used to mean. Record 10. Mansa Musa, the Gold King of Mali. Forget Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. Centuries before stock markets or electric cars, one man redefined what wealth could be. Mansa Musa, the 14th century ruler of the Mali Empire in West Africa, is often called the richest man who ever lived. And honestly, it's not an exaggeration. This guy literally broke economies just by passing through. When he went on his legendary pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324, he didn't just travel with guards and servants. He brought a caravan of over 60,000 people, soldiers, courtiers, and slaves, plus hundreds of camels carrying gold. Musa handed out so much of it along the way, especially in Cairo, that he caused inflation so severe it took over a decade for the local economy to recover. Imagine giving away so much cash that you crash a national currency. That's next-level rich. But Mansa Musa wasn't just a hoarder of gold. He was a builder of civilizations. Under his rule, Mali became a global center for trade, education, and religion. The city of Timbuktu, funded by his wealth, became the intellectual heart of Africa, full of scholars, libraries, and stunning architecture. The Jingareber Mosque, still standing today, was built during his reign by a famous architect Musa imported from Andalusia. His riches did not come from factories or oil. They came from gold mines that made Mali one of the most powerful economies on earth. At its height, Mali supplied nearly half the world's gold. And yet, Musa used his fortune not only to live in splendor but to build schools and mosques that defined West Africa's legacy. IAS said that even trying to estimate his net worth in today's dollars is pointless because his wealth wasn't just personal. It was systemic. He controlled resources so vast they made him a walking economy. If there was ever a man who could say, "Money can move the world," it was Mansa Musa. Number 9. Augustus Caesar, the emperor who owned the world. Now, let us travel back even further, to the man who became the world's first true billionaire in the age before banking, Augustus Caesar, the founder of the Roman Empire. When Augustus took power in 27 BC, Rome had already conquered much of the known world. But what made Augustus truly rich wasn't just conquest. It was control. He owned Egypt as his personal property. Yes, the entire country. After defeating Cleopatra and Mark Antony, Augustus absorbed Egypt not into the Roman state, but into his private portfolio. The taxes, the grain, the treasures, all of it flowed directly to him. Modern economists estimate his wealth at around $4.6 trillion in today's money. That's 4 times richer than the richest person alive right now. Augustus wasn't the kind of ruler to just sit on piles of gold, though. He was a master of image and influence. He poured money into infrastructure, roads, aqueducts, temples, transforming Rome from a crumbling republic into a shining marble capital. "I found Rome a city of brick," he famously said, and left it a city of marble. He used wealth as propaganda, turning architecture into power. Every grand monument was both a gift and a reminder of who controlled it all. Even the Roman army, the greatest military force on earth, was loyal to him personally because he paid their salaries directly. What's more, Augustus reshaped the entire economic system. He introduced standardized coins that carried his image, ensuring his face traveled farther than any messenger could. He was rich in the literal sense, but also rich in influence. The first person in history to merge political and economic domination so completely that the two became one. And in doing so, he didn't just create an empire. He built a brand that lasted for centuries. Even after his death, Roman emperors would keep his title, Caesar, as the ultimate mark of power. It's safe to say that if money is power, Augustus Caesar invented the ultimate power move. Mansa Musa and Augustus Caesar might have lived thousands of years apart, but they shared a truth that echoes through history. Real wealth isn't just about numbers, it is about control. One commanded the gold that built civilizations, the other commanded the empire that ruled the world. Together, they remind us that the meaning of rich has never just been about money. It has been about who gets to shape the world with it. Sucker 8. Emperor Shenzong of Song, the Dragon Throne's banker king. Long before Wall Street or the Federal Reserve, the Song dynasty in China mastered the art of money, literally. And at the heart of it was Emperor Shenzong, who ruled from 1067 to 1085. While Western Europe was still struggling with bartering and coins of mixed metals, China had already invented paper money, state bonds, and one of the world's most advanced taxation systems. Shenzong sat atop an empire that controlled roughly a quarter of the world's GDP, a number unmatched until modern America. If you wanted silk, porcelain, or gunpowder, you paid China. And Shenzong was the ultimate shareholder. His wealth came not from personal extravagance but from a bureaucratic machine so efficient it would make any modern accountant jealous. China's population was booming. Agriculture was thriving thanks to innovations like fast-growing champa rice, and commerce was exploding across the Silk Road. Taxes poured into the imperial treasury by the shipload. The Song dynasty even introduced government-sponsored merchant ships, floating trade empires that stretched as far as the Middle East. Shenzong's treasury was so flush with silver and copper that inflation became a national concern. Imagine the government printing so much money in the 11th century that they had to invent fiscal policy to control it. That was Shenzong's reality. But he wasn't just a collector of riches, he was a reformer. Guided by his famous minister Wang Anshi, he launched sweeping new policies, aimed at redistributing wealth, providing welfare for peasants, and supporting public works. Think of it as a medieval version of social democracy, except funded by a treasury worth billions. His rule showed how wealth could fuel both prosperity and instability. Paper money, while revolutionary, also became a weapon. When too much was printed, it weakened the empire's long-term financial health. Still, during his reign, the Song dynasty reached unprecedented heights, a glittering age of science, trade, and culture. Emperor Shenzong proved that you didn't need to conquer foreign lands to be rich, you just needed to master the economy of your own. Letter 7. John D. Rockefeller, the oil king who built modern capitalism. Fast forward nearly a millennium, and the new gold wasn't gold at all. It was black, liquid, and buried beneath American soil. John D. Rockefeller, founder of Standard Oil, didn't just make money. He created the modern idea of monopoly. By the 1880s, his company controlled over 90% of the United States oil industry. Every train, every lamp, every machine that needed fuel, all of it traced back to Rockefeller. In today's dollars, his fortune peaked around $400 billion. That's enough to make even Jeff Bezos look like he's still waiting for payday. But Rockefeller's story wasn't just about accumulation. It was about systemization. He revolutionized business itself. Before him, capitalism was chaotic, full of small players fighting tooth and nail. Rockefeller saw a bigger picture. He bought out competitors, standardized production, and optimized every part of the process. He didn't rely on chance. He built an empire through cold, methodical efficiency. And while the public came to see him as a ruthless robber baron, history eventually recognized him as the architect of corporate structure, the blueprint every multinational company still follows. Here's the twist. Despite his ruthless reputation, Rockefeller was also one of history's greatest philanthropists. By his later years, he gave away over $500 million, roughly equal to $10 billion today, funding universities, hospitals, and medical research. His foundations helped eradicate diseases like hookworm and yellow fever, and his donations built the University of Chicago. He famously said, "I believe the power to make money is a gift from God." Whether divine or not, his mastery of organization turned raw oil into civilization's bloodstream. Yet his wealth also triggered a national backlash. Public outrage over his control of energy and transportation led to America's first antitrust laws. In 1911, the Supreme Court ordered the breakup of Standard Oil into 34 smaller companies, many of which became Exxon, Chevron, and Mobil. Ironically, that breakup made him even richer. Each of those companies' stocks skyrocketed, and Rockefeller's wealth multiplied. It's the ultimate paradox. Destroy his empire, and he just grows stronger. Emperor Shenzong and Rockefeller might have lived worlds apart. One ruled a dynasty of porcelain and paper money. The other dominated an empire of oil and steel. But both proved the same eternal truth. Wealth isn't just about resources. It's about vision. Shenzong's China invented the financial tools of modern economies. Rockefeller's America perfected them. And in their wake, they left legacies that built the world we live in today. Shirt 6. Andrew Carnegie, the steel titan who forged an empire. If Rockefeller built America's oil empire, Andrew Carnegie built its skeleton. Born into poverty in Scotland, Carnegie immigrated to the United States as a child, worked as a bobbin boy in a textile factory for $1.20 a week, and eventually became one of the richest men who ever lived. By the time he sold his company in 1901, his wealth in today's value was estimated at over $370 billion. His story wasn't just about rags to riches. It was about how steel transformed the modern world. Carnegie understood one thing better than anyone else. The future was made of metal. Railroads, skyscrapers, bridges, every structure of progress needed steel, and Carnegie's company produced it faster and cheaper than anyone else. He adopted the revolutionary Bessemer process, which allowed steel to be mass-produced efficiently, and he reinvested profits relentlessly into new technologies. His steel built the Brooklyn Bridge, the Washington Monument, and even the spine of New York's skyline. In many ways, he didn't just build infrastructure, he built America's future. But here's what made Carnegie truly fascinating. He believed in the gospel of wealth. He famously said that the man who dies rich dies disgraced. So, after dominating the steel industry, he spent the rest of his life giving his fortune away. He funded over 2,500 libraries across the world, built Carnegie Hall in New York, and established major universities and research centers. He didn't want to leave behind money. He wanted to leave behind knowledge. To him, the true purpose of wealth was to uplift humanity. Still, his success wasn't without controversy. The brutal working conditions in his steel mills, including the infamous Homestead Strike of 1892, exposed the dark side of industrial capitalism. Workers were underpaid and overworked while Carnegie's wealth soared. It is the classic paradox of progress. One man's fortune often came at the cost of thousands of others, sweat and blood. Yet, even with his flaws, Carnegie's vision shaped the industrial age. His name became synonymous with both ambition and philanthropy. Proof that a man could rise from nothing to rule the world's greatest industry, and then use that power to educate generations to come. Number 5. Akbar the Great, the Emperor of Wealth and Tolerance. Now we cross continents to India, during the glittering height of the Mughal Empire in the 16th century. Akbar the Great wasn't just a ruler. He was a living embodiment of imperial grandeur. Under his reign, India accounted for nearly 1/4 of global GDP. To put it simply, when the rest of the world was struggling through wars and famine, Akbar's empire was overflowing with art, architecture, and gold. His wealth was so immense that the royal treasuries in Agra and Fatehpur Sikri were described as mountains of jewels and coins. Visitors from Europe wrote of walls literally shimmering with gems. But Akbar's greatness wasn't built on greed. It was built on strategy. He understood that true wealth came from unity. India at the time was a patchwork of kingdoms divided by religion, culture, and language. Akbar dissolved those barriers by promoting tolerance and meritocracy. He married princesses from Hindu kingdoms, abolished the tax on non-Muslims, and filled his court with scholars and artists from across Asia. The result? A golden age of prosperity and cultural fusion. His empire became the beating heart of global trade. Silk, spices, textiles, and gems flowed through Indian ports, enriching not only his coffers but the world's markets. And his vision extended beyond material wealth. Akbar was obsessed with knowledge and debate. He built a house of worship where scholars of all faiths, Muslims, Hindus, Christians, Jains, could discuss philosophy and theology. Imagine an emperor running the world's first interfaith talk show in the 1500s. He even founded a new philosophical movement called Din-i-Ilahi, aiming to unify the moral truths of all religions. Economically, Akbar's policies were revolutionary. He standardized taxes, introduced a fair revenue system, and invested in infrastructure that boosted trade. His empire was so stable and efficient that European travelers compared it to a perfect machine. His rule wasn't just about accumulation, it was about balance. Akbar showed that wealth and wisdom could coexist, that an empire could be rich not only in gold, but also in culture and humanity. While Carnegie's America symbolized the industrial power of modernity, Akbar's India represented the elegance and depth of civilization at its zenith. Both men proved in their own ways that wealth could build not just fortunes, but entire worlds of knowledge and legacy. 4. King Solomon, the biblical billionaire of wisdom and gold. When people talk about legendary wealth, they often forget that one of the earliest and most mysterious fortunes in human history belongs to King Solomon of Israel. According to the Bible and countless ancient records, Solomon's riches were beyond imagination. He ruled during the 10th century BCE, a time when gold wasn't just valuable, it was divine, and Solomon had so much of it that silver, as the Bible puts it, was considered worthless. His ships brought in gold from Ophir, silver from Tarshish, and exotic goods from Arabia and Africa. Yearly tributes from surrounding nations filled his treasuries. One account estimates that Solomon received over 25 tons of gold per year. That's nearly $2 billion annually in today Assyrian money. And that's just the tribute, not counting trade or taxation. But Solomon's wealth wasn't merely material, it was symbolic. His greatest treasure was his wisdom, which itself became a source of economic power. When the Queen of Sheba visited Jerusalem, she didn't just bring lavish gifts, she came to test his intellect. According to legend, she left in awe, and with trade agreements that enriched both kingdoms. Solomon built the first Temple of Jerusalem, a structure so magnificent that it became the spiritual and economic center of the region. His wealth flowed from a combination of diplomacy, trade, and intellect. He made alliances instead of wars, secured trade routes instead of territories, and cultivated prosperity instead of destruction. His empire was small in size but vast in influence, an early model of soft power. The grandeur of his court, the gold-covered temple, and the legend of his mines became timeless symbols of divine prosperity. Even today, the wealth of Solomon remains the benchmark for unimaginable riches. Yet his story is also a warning. In his later years, his extravagance and political compromises drained his empire's stability. The same gold that built his kingdom also fractured it after his death. Solomon's tale is a perfect reflection of history, as eternal truth. Wealth can build nations, but it can just as easily undo them. Number 3. Genghis Khan, the conqueror who owned the earth, but not its gold. Now, let's talk about a different kind of rich, the kind you can't measure in money. Genghis Khan, founder of the Mongol Empire, may not have had banks or treasuries, but he ruled over the largest contiguous land empire in human history. At his death in 1227, His domain stretched from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe. If you measure wealth as control over resources, territory, and manpower, Genghis Khan might be the richest man who ever lived. But here's what's fascinating. He didn't care about hoarding wealth. Unlike the kings of Europe or the emperors of China, Genghis believed in redistribution, Mongol style. He plundered empires but shared the spoils with his generals and soldiers. His goal wasn't to live in gold-plated palaces but to control the arteries of trade, the Silk Road, the lifeline between East and West. And he succeeded. Under his rule, the Mongol Empire became a single massive free trade zone stretching thousands of miles. He introduced passports for safe travel, standardized weights and measures, and established a postal system that connected continents. Ironically, his economic policies laid the foundation for what we now call globalization. Merchants could travel from Venice to Beijing without fear, protected by Mongol patrols. That peace, known as the Pax Mongolica, unleashed the greatest economic boom of the medieval world. And even though Genghis himself didn't pile up gold, his empire generated more collective wealth than any kingdom before it. Cities he conquered, like Samarkand, Baghdad, and Beijing, flourished under Mongol control as hubs of trade, culture, and technology. What made Genghis truly unique was his meritocracy. He promoted based on talent, not birth, which allowed brilliant administrators to rise and manage his vast empire efficiently. He collected tribute in horses, silk, spices, and slaves, the global commodities of his day. It's estimated that the Mongol Empire controlled a quarter of the world's wealth at its peak, and yet Genghis himself lived like a nomad until his death, sleeping in tents, eating simple meals, and moving with his troops. For him, wealth wasn't about luxury, it was about legacy. He valued conquest, unity, and immortality over any coin. In a strange twist of history, Genghis Khan and King Solomon represent two sides of the same coin, one rich in gold, the other in power. Solomon's riches glittered in temples and jewels. Genghis's wealth galloped across empires and bloodlines. Yet both proved that wealth, in any form, is a tool, one that can build civilizations or break them apart. Year 2. Jakob Fugger, the banker who bought empires. Before Wall Street existed, one man turned Europe itself into his personal stock portfolio. His name was Jakob Fugger, a German banker from the 16th century whose wealth quietly shaped the destiny of nations. He wasn't a king or emperor, but he financed them all. Fugger, known as the Rich, was the ultimate power broker of the Renaissance. By modern estimates, his fortune would be worth over $400 billion today, placing him above even Rockefeller. Yet most people have never heard his name. Fugger's story begins in Augsburg, where his family traded cloth. But young Jakob had bigger dreams. He wanted to control money itself. He expanded into mining, acquiring vast silver and copper operations across Central Europe, and soon became the main supplier of precious metals to the Vatican. Yes, the Vatican. He financed popes and princes alike. When Emperor Maximilian needed cash to fight wars and fund his lavish lifestyle, Fugger wrote the check. When Charles V wanted to bribe electors to become Holy Roman Emperor, Fugger funded that too. In return, he received monopolies on European mining and trade rights that turned him into a one-man economic superpower. But his influence went deeper than just business. Fugger invented tools that still define modern finance: double-entry bookkeeping, early versions of stock investment, and complex loan systems that made rulers dependent on him. His network of correspondents stretched across Europe, Venice, Antwerp, Rome, long before global banking was even possible. At one point, the Fuggers' financial empire was so influential that when they stopped lending, governments literally collapsed. The phrase, "too big to fail," might as well have been coined for Jakob Fugger. Yet he wasn't just calculating profits, he understood branding. He built palaces, commissioned art, and sponsored churches to cement his family's legacy. One of his projects, the Fuggerei in Augsburg, is the world's oldest social housing complex, still operating today. Residents still pay the same annual rent he set in 1521, 1 rein guilder, about $1. Even 5 centuries later, his name remains carved into the foundations of capitalism itself. Fugger didn't just make money. He turned debt into power, showing the world that sometimes the richest person isn't the one wearing the crown. It is the one who finances it. Number 1. Genghis Khan's descendant, Kublai Khan, the Emperor of Two Worlds. If Genghis Khan conquered the land, his grandson Kublai Khan conquered civilization. Ruling in the 13th century, Kublai established the Yuan dynasty in China and controlled an empire that spanned from Korea to Eastern Europe. He ruled over a population of 100 million, a staggering figure at the time, and commanded trade routes that linked Asia with Europe in a way the world had never seen before. But Kublai wasn't just a conqueror. He was a builder, administrator, and visionary ruler who understood the economics of empire. Under his rule, China became the wealthiest nation on earth. He revived Silk Road trade, creating a commercial superhighway that brought silk, porcelain, and spices to Europe, and gold, silver, and glass back from the West. He introduced paper currency, built grand canals to transport goods, and made his capital, modern-day Beijing, one of the richest cities in history. Marco Polo, who served in Kublai's court, described his wealth as beyond all belief. The Khan's palaces were adorned with gold and precious stones. His treasury overflowed with tributes from Persia, India, and Russia. Kublai controlled not just land, but the arteries of global commerce. His empire was so vast and efficient that it effectively became the first world economy. Ships under his banner reached as far as Africa. Trade between East and West flourished in ways unseen since the Roman Empire. He wasn't just rich in treasure. He was rich in diversity, overseeing cultures, religions, and technologies that blended into a golden age of exchange. Yet Kublai's story, like many others on this list, ended with the same lesson. Even the greatest wealth fades. His descendants squandered his fortune, rebellions fractured the empire, and by the 14th century, the Yuan dynasty fell. But his impact lived on. The trade systems he built became the foundation for centuries of global commerce. Kublai Khan's fortune, like Fugger's and Mansa Musa's, teaches us that rich isn't he just about what's in your vault. It's about how far your influence travels. His empire didn't need digital banking or cryptocurrency to connect the world. It did so with horses, ships, and ambition. And that ambition, more than anything, defined the meaning of wealth throughout history. So, what do these 10 titans of fortune, from gold kings and emperors to oil barons and bankers, all have in common? They remind us that wealth has always been more than just money. For Mansa Musa, it was gold that built knowledge. For Augustus, it was empire that built order. For Rockefeller and Carnegie, it was industry that built nations. For Fugger and Kublai, it was finance and trade that built the world. Each of them redefined what it meant to be rich, not just in possessions, but in power, in vision, and in legacy. They lived in different eras, spoke different languages, ruled through different means, yet all shared one timeless truth. True wealth is the power to shape the world around you. Whether by sword, coin, or mind, they left behind more than riches. They left behind systems, cities, and civilizations that still echo in ours today. If you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button and share it with anyone who loves history and untold stories. Subscribe to our channel for more fascinating deep dives into the hidden wealth, power, and mysteries of the past. Join our community for exclusive content and behind-the-scenes insights, and if you'd like to support our work directly, click Thanks below the video. Your support helps us keep uncovering the stories of those who changed the world, not just with power, but with fortune. See you in the next video.